Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this very special Blood, Sweat and Tears of Joy. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Snowdome Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. On behalf of our chair, John Salvaris, the Snowdome founders and board and executive, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the more than 160 people joining us online tonight from across Australia. Before I introduce our host for this evening, we've got a little housekeeping to note. We're encouraging everybody to ask questions during the event, and you'll be able to do this. I think you're going to be so inspired by the panel that there will probably be quite a few. So submit your questions using the Q&A button. It's either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're using. And for some people, it may even be on the right. I'd like to take a quick moment to acknowledge Vince Giarusso, who composed the beautiful music playing as you join this evening. And I'll come back and join you later on. But now that we're all set, it's time to sit back, get comfortable, and allow me to introduce you to our host for this evening. Professor Miles Prince is an internationally recognised haematologist and Professor of Medicine at both Melbourne and Monash Universities. He's Director of Cancer Immunology and Molecular Oncology at Epworth Healthcare and established the Centre for Blood Cell Therapies at Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in 1999. Miles is a member of the Australian Blood Cancer Task Force, which developed Australia's first national strategic action plan for blood cancer. He is a fellow of the Academy of Health and Medical Sciences, and in 2014 was appointed member of the Order of Australia for distinguished services to medicine, particularly in the areas of blood cancer research, patient care and philanthropic leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Miles Prince.
Thanks very much, Kirsty, and welcome everybody to a night of blood, sweat and tears. I think we've got a really exciting night ahead for us. I think we've got some amazing stories that is about blood cancer and the journey of the people that you're about to meet. The members of our panel that I'm about to introduce really represent an intersection of a whole journey through blood cancers. They have stories that have positively and directly been impacted by clinical trials and research, and they really demonstrate the journey that people go through when they experience a blood cancer and they need new treatments. The mission of Snowdome is to accelerate new therapies to patients with blood cancers, and we do that by supporting new clinical trials, genomics research, and more recently, immunotherapy research. Ultimately, you'll hear how research has led our panelists to lead longer, better lives, which is part of Snowdome's mission statement. Clinical trials are central to this, whether that be new drugs, cellular therapies, or genomic testing. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel. I'm going to introduce them individually as as we talk through their stories, because you won't remember each of them if I give them to you all at once. First person is the delightful Karen Frankel. We all fell in love with Karen at the 2019 Bloody Good Dinner. Karen was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma shortly after the birth of her daughter Millie in 2019. And Karen underwent chemotherapy and radiation treatment. And I'm not going to tell you any more of her story. She's going to tell it herself. She's in remission. She's certainly cured. She's just delivered her second child. And I'll hand over to Karen to tell us, really, Karen, how did it all start? What was the start of your journey?
Thanks, Miles. I just have to apologise firstly just for my voice. I don't normally sound like this, but I will push through because, yeah, I'm really happy to be here on the other side of it all and share, I guess, the journey that I've been on. So for me, it really all started when I was pregnant. Seemingly, I had a cough, had some tightness in my chest, all things that seemed pretty common with pregnancy and a baby pushing in all sorts of places and causing the body to do strange things. So yeah, nobody really thought anything of it. But what transpired was, I guess, a very healthy pregnancy, a beautiful birth. I had a beautiful baby girl, Millie. And I guess there was just this overarching feeling once Millie was born of, I guess, was there anything sinister going on? And that sort of led me to do a scan the day after I gave birth. That X-ray showed, I guess, a mass in my chest. And at that point, we didn't really know what that meant. So I went on to have a biopsy, and then that confirmed the diagnosis of a primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma, which in lay terms means this big thing in the middle of my chest, which was, I guess, then explained, the tightness that I was experiencing and the coughing that I was experiencing. So, yeah, really for me, it came out of nowhere. I was completely shocked. My loved ones were completely shocked. I guess what was supposed to be the best time of my life in having my first baby and, being in that newborn bubble, basically turned into a nightmare, and was completely unexpected. So, yeah, that's sort of a little bit there, Miles.
So obviously it led to your first introduction to the medical system. I mean, you'd been healthy and perfectly well then.
Yeah.
And suddenly you heard the words, "You have a blood cancer."
Yeah. I felt sick. I think I guess I hadn't really ever been exposed in that way. My dad had passed away of a blood cancer many years before, but I guess, it was years of not really having it around me. I was healthy, young, living my best life. And it was really a shock. And I guess there was definitely a sense of fear. And you hear the C word, and to me, I just thought, I'm going to die. Like, I know that's a very awful thing to say, but that's really how I felt at that time. And I kind of thought everything that I had everything I had to look forward to was going to slip through my fingers. You're going to have the joy of hearing baby Jack in the background getting ready to have his dinner.
Sounds very good. Very appropriate. So yes, well, so that's your second in the background, is it, Jack?
It is. It's the beautiful Jack, who's now 7 months old.
Your mum was there, and you and your mum and husband, and you had all the tests, diagnosis, chemotherapy was outlined, and then radiation treatment. How long did all of that last? And how did you feel you managed through all of that?
It was pretty full on. So I think I had Millie on a Monday, on the 18th of Feb. I think my first treatment was the beginning of March. So from having a baby to starting treatment, it all happened really, really quickly. It was March till June of chemotherapy. And that was hospital stays for a week, basically 24/7 hooked up. And it was sort of a week of hospital, a week of feeling horrible, and a week of feeling a little bit better, where I could sort of get out and go for walks and do those sorts of normal things. So it was sort of, 5 months of that sort of hospital environment, followed by another month of radiotherapy every day for a month. So I probably finished all my treatment in August, end of August. And at that point, my body was pretty smashed. I think because I was young and healthy up until that point, Miles and the team were able to really throw everything at it to give me the best chance of really, stopping it in its tracks. But that meant that, the recovery was really tough. but I like to say that I'm a really good patient. I do everything that I'm told. I'm very disciplined in that way, and I think that also just gave me comfort through a time of having no control. I think that allowed me to have some control in it all. So at the end of 2019, I was able to celebrate, my mum's birthday with a family getaway and have, a normal holidays. So, for me, it was really nice to be able to do that. And it was really just rebuilding from there and trying to get my strength back, but not do things too quickly, I guess.
You're pretty clever at work. You were torn away from work. You've got a very important job. You had a tendency to look at, what the options were, treatments. How did you manage to separate yourself from, being in control to just accepting? And what was your understanding of how that treatment, how the treatment was put together, and you were being, having to entrust yourself in this, I suppose, result of a lot of science, a lot of scientific research that's led to where you were. How did you cope with that? What was your philosophy?
Yeah, look, I think it's okay. I'm a very trusting person, but I equally was made to feel really comfortable and confident from day dot. So I think the best way I can explain it, it felt as if Miles, yourself, and the team opened a drawer and picked up this Bible on this is everything that Karen needs to feel better. And you just explained it in a way that made sense to me and gave me comfort that it was tailor-made, and that at the end of it, it was going to give me the best chance to really fight this thing off. At the beginning, it was gibberish. I'd never even heard of a PIC line. I hadn't heard of, the epoch, and all these words were just another world to me. And yeah, I guess I was really fortunate that I was met with a team that was patient, understanding, and I just felt like I was in the very best hands and receiving the very best care possible.
After all of that, so, you're told the aim of treatment is to cure. And so you're sitting there after your 6 months or 8 months of treatment, and it's like, I know that you're saying, well, what happens next? What's going to happen to me? How do you manage this sort of the unknown that's ahead? Particularly young, you've just had a baby. How do you manage it in your head, balancing that reality that it could come back versus the positiveness of I want to be cured?
Oh, look, that's the $1 million question. I think I'll probably grapple with that for the rest of my life, if I'm being honest. I think, the lead up to every scan, you feel sick, you feel anxious, you feel nervous. I think I'm a pretty optimistic person, but I think I'm also a realist. So just trying to really get that balance is tough. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that will forever be looming. And as much as I would love to think that it's done and dusted, I think that fear will always be there, and that's just a reality. And I think that's why Snowdome and everything that this foundation stands for, and everything that I guess I've been lucky enough to be the recipient of, why it is so important, because the treatment that I had worked this time, thank God. But yeah, if it comes back, I may not be so lucky, or there are others that aren't as responsive as I was. So I think that's why it is so important.
Can still see you, 2019 at the Bloody Good dinner. You didn't have any hair.
No.
We all thought, how is she going to go? How's she going to go? We're now 2022 post-COVID. What events have happened since then?
Wow, a lot. I feel like I've crammed a lot in. So yeah, obviously there was Millie growing up and motherhood. There was COVID, there was going back to work. So that was a huge milestone for me. I didn't think that I'd be able to go back. My brain was mush from having a baby, but that combined with chemo, I had no confidence whatsoever. So I think being able to go back to work was huge, and do that up until a point where I managed to, fall pregnant again, which was amazing. And then, having Jack in October of last year, there have been family holidays, there have been, wedding anniversaries, there have been, so many beautiful milestones and moments that I've been able to experience that, I honestly didn't think I was going to be able to. So I had my birthday 2 days ago. So, I think a birthday isn't really ever going to be the same, because you're just so more just grateful to have another year under your belt and live life.
So you said to me that having Jack, you were able to realise what motherhood was supposed to be like, in terms of that. That really struck me when you said that. What did you mean by that?
I guess the first time round with Millie, it's not what anybody hopes for. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody else. I wasn't able to breastfeed. I wasn't, when I held her, I was wearing gloves and a gown. I didn't have the strength to play and feed and, do all the things that sort of are a given. With Jack, I've been able to do all of those things. I've had the energy to enjoy him and have play dates and be part of mothers groups and things that are just normal. I feel very, very grateful. And Millie was a blessing in her own way. And the fact that, she came out of it all and is an unbelievable, vibrant 3-year-old now. Jack was equally another gift that, we didn't think we'd be able to conceive. So to have him as well, and beautiful 7-month-old, they're both little angels for their own reasons.
Before we move on, just one final question, which is, you've been engaged in Snowdome, and you said about what we do and what's done in Snowdome. Why have you connected?
That's a huge question. I just feel, a huge debt of gratitude, I guess, as a starting point. Everyone that has put $1 towards this foundation has had a tangible impact on my life and the life of my family. And for me, I wouldn't be able to do everything that I'm doing now without it. That's the reality. I think if it didn't exist, I wouldn't have been able to have the genetic, testing that I had, which allowed you, Miles, and the rest of the team to be able to look at what was really going on with me and be able to attack it in the right way. So, it means everything.
Well, we'll come back, Karen. I think all we can do is thank you for being so brave. And I think braveness has a lot to do with it. And I think, you've touched on all the things that, Snowdome's about, which is, making hope real. And I think from day one, it's about, recognizing, as you said, thinking that you were going to die, and that then turns into hope, and then the process of a brave person going through what they have to go through. It's just, I wish we could turn our Snowdomes into crystal balls and show our patients 3 years down the track what they're going to be like. It would make their journey a lot easier. Brenda is a new Snowdome family member. Brenda's a Professor Emeritus at Deakin University. And I'd like you, Brenda, when you have a chance, to just tell us a little bit about your career before we talk about your journey in blood cancer, because I think, to know the person, and I was certainly, I think when we first met, I was overly interested in your career. You probably just wanted me to talk about your blood cancer, but, getting to know the person is really important. And so, a little bit about you, but I will just preempt the discussion in saying that, you you received treatment for your lymphoma, but it's come back, and you've subsequently had further treatments. And that's what we'll talk a little bit about. And I know that a lot of what Karen said has resonated with you. I mean, maybe we'll come back to that point, but I'll hand over to you, and maybe you can tell us the Brenda that was, what she was doing when she was diagnosed, and then we'll take the journey from there.
Thanks, Miles. Before I start, I just want to say how humbled I was to hear from Karen, and I've read about Jeff, and I feel like a bit of a fraud, really. So to people listening, my journey's quite different. As you can see, I'm a lot older. I started working life as a school teacher, but I finished my working life as the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Education at Deakin University, where we had in our faculty 17,000 students and about 1,500 staff. So I've had a very privileged working life, and generally a very privileged life. Is that enough? So I'm interested in research and those things. So that's probably important because of the way I approached my diagnoses. The first time I found my cancer was, I found a lump under my arm, and I went to the doctor, as you do, and we did a test, and sure enough, after a biopsy and some surgery, they confirmed B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I went through about 4 or 5 months of treatment, chemo and immunotherapy, and it was all gone, and I was declared cured for a few years, which was very nice. And then in 2018, I started noticing that things weren't well with me, little things like infection here or something else, a skin rash there. And I went back to my then hematologist and said, something's not right, I need to get checked. They couldn't find it. It took about 6 months to be able to get hold of a proper biopsy that would diagnose what it was. And by that stage, I'd tried everything. I'd tried more immunotherapy. And while I enjoy the cocktail bar at Epworth, where we go to get chemo, day chemo, I don't really need to go there for cocktails. So we, anyway, he when it finally came back, and this is important, I think, it finally came back with a positive diagnosis that I had relapsed, and it was very widespread. He said to me in tears, I'm really sorry that I have to tell you this, and you'll need to get a stem cell transplant, and I need to recommend you to someone. And I said, well, who would you recommend? Who would you go to? And he said, oh, Miles, Prince. So 2 days later, Miles saw me at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I left work. I went and saw my boss on the Wednesday afternoon. Friday was my last day. And Monday, I was at Epworth having the beginnings of my stem cell treatment, which goes for a while. So I had stem cells, chemo, radiation. That lasted just on 2 years, but I was in remission, and a scan showed that there was some questionable nodes in my neck. That was at the end of 2020, and I'm sure it was only because I was bored sick with COVID and needed something to do. But New Year's Eve, I got my formal diagnosis from Miles on New Year's Eve, 2020. And I was at Peter Mac by the 8th of January, being assessed for a new therapy called CAR T. And I knew about it. It had been around. That I knew it was there. I didn't know as much about it as I do now. but I was more than happy to be part of doing that and having that treatment. It had only been running for a couple of years in Australia and mostly through Peter Mac. I think for me, my journey, I don't think I've ever been afraid. I have been always really grateful because I don't want people like Belinda and Jeff and children, which is why I think Snowdome is so valuable because of where it comes from. You don't want those people to have illnesses that are untreatable. And I got lymphoma for my 60th birthday and I've had a very rewarding, interesting and reasonably uneventful journey through all the steps to remission each time. And I feel really grateful that it's me and not my children or someone young that I know. And I'm more than happy to play, if you like, that's the word, around how to make these treatments more effective. So I'm in about 3 research studies at Peter Mac at the moment, how to make them more effective, how to monitor and know if when people are going well or not going well, what's happening in their blood that tells people. I've done a lot of reading. I've been trained well by my previous hematologist, by Miles. You read this article, read that. I don't understand 9/10 of it, but I'm very, very curious about what's going on and what's being given to me. So I've always wanted to have those conversations. One of my specialists at Peter Mac asked me, what did I want to know? And I said, everything. And he said, oh, okay. So you sort of, not because I can do anything particularly myself, although I can be healthy and fit and prepare well, but I am really interested in the stories. I'm really interested in the cures and the way we go about it scientifically. So I'm very interested in research.
So Brenda, it's really been interesting the way that you've described it, because I think you've articulated a lot that I observe in patients, because I think people, when they think about cancer treatment, when you hear it from somebody else, you think, oh, this is like having your gallbladder removed, or having where you walk in, the surgeon says to you, I'm going to book you in, you're going to have your operation, and then you're going to walk out and you'll be fixed. And there's actually when you think about, what most classic medicine is about, it is that sort of come in, get it fixed, go out. But in fact, we are, with cancer treatments, we're constantly in this evolving journey of making it better. It's not like we've reached the pinnacle of how to fix a hip or a pinnacle of how to fix a gallbladder. It's actually, how do we make the journey better for people, the next person or the next generation of people? Because we all want to get rid of the bad bits and we also want to increase the cure. So I think what you've described is sort of your recognition that you're actually in this with the doctors, making progress while at the same time fixing you. And your perspective is really interesting that way, because I don't think it's something that we even as doctors recognize, let alone patients. I mean, how did you feel? Did the doctors feel threatened that you were so inquisitive, or that they were doing stuff to you that really was so brand new? How was the mood, the feel for that?
My response to that is that sometimes, obviously, that's a vague response, but sometimes they're not expecting you to ask or expecting to be prepared to tell you. I say it's my lymphoma, this is my lymphoma and my journey, and everyone's is different. And what we learn in medicine is that what works on one person brilliantly won't necessarily work on another. So we need lots of opportunities, lots of responses that we can make. And we've got to tweak things so that they fit each individual, each patient. And doctors generally have been really fantastic, I have to tell you. I think right from Peter, through to you and Michael and the team, but I do sometimes get the feeling that, why do I want to know what the name of the drug is that I'm being given? Because I want to be able to read about that drug and know about it and know how I can better deal with it if that's what I need to do. So I've had a fair number of them over the years, but I've never felt particularly put down. You do feel more vulnerable because you're the patient and doctors have knowledge. But the more knowledge I felt, the more knowledge I had about my lymphoma, the more able I was to have a conversation. And I don't know if you remember, Miles, but about April last year, might have been, no, the year before, April 2020. And it was a wet, rainy, horrible night. And I was the last appointment you had. And I asked you some crazy question about how I knew this was working and this wasn't. And you sat there for about 25 minutes and explained it all to me very, very carefully. And that's special. I'm not just trying to stroke your ego. But I have found in the main that most of the medical teams that I've worked with, the people in PET scan area, the people in apheresis, the people in the drug administration, there's always someone who's happy to tell you. At the cocktail bar at Epworth, I say, where we get our chemo, day chemo, they're more than happy to tell you about what they know and they bring to your story. And that's, having that time and attention is a great privilege.
Just to change gear a little bit, I mean, does it dawn upon you about what's being done to your body, that your white blood cells have been taken out, grown in another country, manipulated with genes inserted by an inactivated virus to express proteins on the surface, which will then fly all the way back to you from overseas, get infused into you, go into your body, and you're told that you could have all of these potential side effects as your immune system goes crazy to kill your lymphoma. Do you think at night, oh my God, that's all happened? Does it seem like a dream, or how do you?
It doesn't seem like a dream. Not a dream. And not a nightmare. It's a bit like making the perfect cake. You make a cake, the first cake you make is plain and vanilla, and then you start adding chocolate and sprinkles on top or whatever till you get it the way you want it. And that's a very lame analogy, but it is like that. They're not experiences that I would suggest people run out and try. Let's be clear. They're not that much fun. They're work, and they're work intellectually as well as physically. My experience all the way through is I have had very few side effects that have been difficult to manage. And Peter used to say to me, your body really likes this chemo business. So I've been incredibly fortunate, but it's not fun. It's not pleasant. And you are aware that you've been, like someone's opened a cap or poured a bunch of chemicals down your throat one way or another, and into your blood there's these modified cells that are going to, that's where I suppose the hope comes in, that they work and that they are going to kill those cancer cells and help to keep them away. And then you watch your blood counts like a hawk and you wonder what's going on. And like Karen, you never really know if you're free of it or not free of it. You just wait for the next presentation, if that's what it is.
So I suppose I'd make two editorial comments, and then I'm going to ask you a really hard question. So I think that, my editorial comment would be that it's important to remember, and I'm telling the audience here, not you, Brenda, that, you know, CAR T cells just did not exist as a treatment at all, you know, 5 years ago. It was first started to be used in acute lymphoblastic leukemia or childhood leukemia. It then got demonstrated it was effective in chronic lymphocytic leukemia and then into non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the large clinical trials have demonstrated its value in exactly Brenda's situation, such that it's been approved by the Australian regulatory authorities for funding for patients who've relapsed after a stem cell transplant, and now likely to move forward earlier in treatment. So in years coming, Brenda may get actually the CAR T cells instead of the transplant, and that's got to be sorted through. But it's not cheap financially. So Brenda, you know, what would you say to the average taxpayer who says, you know, you've just gone through a treatment that has cost it's cost the taxpayer, you know, around $600,000. Are you worth it?
Well, I'm not, but I'm a really good one to experiment on while we give it to people who are. I think, I want to just add that when I was first diagnosed, I had 8 days off work for the whole treatment program of 4 or 5 months. And I kind of expected, oh, well, if it comes back, I'll just do more of that. And it was only when I realised that that wasn't going to happen that I made a different decision. But I was okay with that too. So, yes. Am I worth it? Probably not. But I think that there are a lot of young people out there who need us to know more and more and more about what treatments work and what helps them work. And CAR T, I read a new article nearly every week on the people who've done research on data they've collected over the last few years, and they see different information coming out about what works with CAR T, what gets in the way of CAR T not working. And I think that's worth at least $600,000.
So I'm going to move on to Jeff, but I would again make the comment that if this was, you know, Q&A and I was standing there and asked the question, you know, what's the value? I think there's two things in addition to what you've said. You know, one is the cost of looking after someone who's cured versus the cost of somebody who's continually relapsing, and the cost of, you know, keeping someone alive with treatment that's ineffective as opposed to a treatment that is curative. And there is costs that are, you know, drugs are expensive, 4 or 5 subsequent treatments. And the second comment would be is that it gets to what you're saying, which is that things, as we improve, things will get cheaper. So, you know, I remember when I was a registrar walking in and listening to the Alfred Hospital radiologist saying they're going to buy this thing called a CT scan and it's going to cost $1 million. This is in 1980s, you know, and so now, you know, what is a CT scan? Where are they? How much they cost? How many? So, you know, things do get cheaper. So I think the other thing is that, you know, they are expensive, they're costing, but hopefully, you know, we'll get more and more efficient. And so it does become relevant to the next person who I'm going to introduce, who's Jeff Neeson, who is, Jeff, you can come on. Jeff was about 40 when diagnosed, and Jeff, you can correct me. And again, I'd love you to tell us a bit about the Jeff before myeloma. But Jeff really is a remarkable person because he really carries the spirit of driving towards what an individual can do to improve the lot of others. And it really speaks to what Brenda was saying about, you know, her helping the next person. Jeff's about, you know, helping the next person in so many ways, and we're going to hear about that. But particularly, I do want to stress before Jeff talks is that he has multiple myeloma, a different disease. We've had 2 patients who've had lymphoma, and Jeff's got myeloma, another one of the blood cancers. So when we think about blood cancers, leukemia, which is a a disease of white blood cells in the bone marrow, lymphoma, which is a disease of white blood cells predominantly in the lymph glands, and myeloma, which is a disease of white blood cells in the bone marrow, which destroys not only the bones, but the immune system. And so it's a tough cancer, probably closer to leukemia than lymphoma, and very different. And the big difference with myeloma is that from day one, the patient is told you are dealing with something that's incurable. And I suppose, Jeff, when you've told us about the Jeff before myeloma, I'd like to know how that felt, the words, you have a blood cancer, and the bit on the end, which is, at the moment, we can't cure you. And how does that feel? So tell us a bit more about you.
Thank you, Miles, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. Look, prior to being diagnosed, I was diagnosed in 2014. And prior to being diagnosed, I guess I was heavily invested in my career and my family, I guess biopic in that respect, in that, you know, I was an engineering consultant and working on some of the, you know, large infrastructure projects around Australia. I traveled the world with my career. And I guess being in my 40s, I was very much invested into racing up that corporate ladder. I wanted to be the best that I could be in the space in which I was working. And it meant a lot to me. You know, I was very proud of my business card, what it meant, and where I was going with it. And, you know, but at the same time, I tried to be holistic. I exercised a lot. I, you know, at the time had, or have 2 children. At the time, they were 5 and 8. George is 5 and Riley was 8. And, you know, I had a very happy, fulfilled, content life. But, you know, being honest, I worked a lot. It was one Tuesday night. I just turned 40. It was about 3 weeks after turning 40. It was a normal evening. I'd been working on a huge bid for my company. And I, that night, went and played basketball, as I did each Tuesday night. And being a big guy, you know, I'm 6'6". I thought to myself, I'll see if I can grab onto the basketball ring and dunk the basketball like all of these young kids are doing. And in doing so, I felt my shoulder, my upper humerus bone go pop. And I was really lucky, actually, because my mum was there watching me. I think I was the only 40-year-old in the state of Victoria to have his mum watching him play basketball still. But, you know, I walked over to mum and I said, Mum, you've got to call an ambulance. I've just dislocated my shoulder and this is really going to hurt in about, oh, there it is. And, you know, I was in a lot of pain, but it wasn't until I got to the hospital that I, you know, went in. Everyone was assuming that I had the dislocated shoulder, that after having scans, the doctors came out to me and said, so explain it to me again. You were at a great height and you fell from a great height onto your arm. And I said, oh, no, my shoulder's just popped out. It's dislocated and I'm really looking forward to you putting it back in again. And they said, well, no, that's not the case. What's actually happened is the whole upper half of your humerus bone has basically fallen apart. It's like termites have eaten it out. And there's not a lot of it left, just basically a you know, eggshell of it left. And so interestingly, I sat in hospital for about 2 weeks and the doctors were scratching their head the whole time. And they then referred me to the hematological ward up at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, where they did a biopsy of the humerus bone and I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Now, the reason why they couldn't diagnose me readily was because I've got what's known as non-secretory multiple myeloma, which means where everybody monitors their myeloma with a simple blood test, generally speaking, I have no blood indicators whatsoever of myeloma. So the only way you can monitor my cancer prevalence is using a pretty invasive bone marrow biopsy, which for those that don't know what a bone marrow biopsy is, it's where they sedate you, they drill into your pelvis about 1.5 to 2 centimeters. They take a core of bone out, and they also take out bone marrow. And it's in measuring that bone marrow, they've found that that's the most representative space where they can, measure my cancer prevalence. And because it's so invasive, and here's the kicker about being non-secretory multiple myeloma, because that process is so invasive, and because they can't just do a basic blood test, I can't access most trials that are currently available to us. And unfortunately, that means I can't access most of the novel drugs, the new Fandango drugs that are being released onto the market. I can't access those unless I have a drug company offer them to me under compassionate access, or until they're approved by the government for funding, which, that represents a challenge, simply because I know well the statistics that suggest that those that can access trials live longer. So reflecting on your comment, Miles, what was it like to find out that I had, you refer to it as an incurable disease, but for me, it was, I was told that it's not, they weren't as kind as saying incurable. I was told that it's terminal. It's interesting because you don't think about yourself. You think about your family, and and that's really hard, especially when you've got a young family. You always think of yourself as living forever, and that's why I guess I have the mindset of the fact that, I'm going to be here till I'm 80, simply because I've got too many people to annoy not to be here until I'm 80. So, but it is really challenging. I reflect on people's COVID experiences. They explained it to me. And my observation was a lot of people were really challenged through the COVID lockdowns that we've had over the past couple of years. People, a lot of people suffered from mental health issues, and a lot of those mental health issues stemmed from the fact, by my observation, that control was taken away. What you could do on a day-to-day basis was stripped away from a lot of us, for one reason or another. And I don't think COVID really hit me that significantly, simply because I felt that when I turned 40 and I was diagnosed with an incurable cancer, that's when a lot of my control over my outcomes was stripped away from me.
So Jeff, just on those points, because I think you're clearly resilient. I mean, and I'm going to ask you, do you consider yourself a resilient person? And did you, at the time, when you're otherwise, like most healthy 40-year-olds, had not really been exposed to major health issues? And then this issue of hope, clearly, and Snowdome focuses on it's about making hope real. How is that balance in your life of the need for hope and the acceptance of resilience? Being resilient, needing hope, are they together, or are they separate entities? Are you different at different times?
I think that we've got to cling on to hope first and foremost, because without hope, that's what we've got. Hope is hearing from somebody who's been living with the disease for 20 or 30 years, and you automatically attach your story to their story. Simply because, without hope, what do we have? I've got too many close friends that have passed from myeloma, but other types of cancers. And, it's hope that it helps me attach my story to the success story, as opposed to, the alternative. Being resilient Yes, I do think I'm resilient, and I've learnt a lot about focusing very much on what I can control. There's a lot, in my life that I can't control, and I totally respect the fact that I have to put my faith into people that are a lot smarter and a lot more dedicated to the medical space than than I'll ever be. And so, from a resilience perspective, it's very much knowing what I can control and focusing my time to that space. It's contributing to things that I can make a difference to, because if I can't make a difference, then there's no sense in me investing my time, my energy, my worry into that space. And I guess an extension to that is what I know abundantly is that the journey of a person with myeloma is that you're diagnosed with myeloma, you're then treated. After a period of being treated, you will inevitably relapse. Then you go and then you seek a second line of treatment. You're going to have a response that may be wonderful, it may not be wonderful, but for me it's been quite good, and I always knew that I'm going to relapse again. Where I put my hope is in the fact that I hope that I can stay in a steady state, that I can keep I can keep as though I can control it. I can control a lot of things, but I control my myeloma stays under control until such time as the next novel treatment becomes available to me. It's we've spoken in the past about I'm not fighting cancer, I'm fighting time. I just need for things to stay under control long enough until such time as that next treatment comes out again. The next treatment comes out that can bring me back into remission again. And then I need that treatment to keep me in remission or under control until the next novel treatment comes out, assuming that CAR T cell therapy isn't going to be the silver bullet that cures us.
So I think the conversation we've had before, has been about this issue of time. I mean, because we have had, at these forums, people say exactly the same thing. And I think, that, and my comment is, I think Einstein, E equals MC squared. It's all about speeding up time. And I think what we don't realize is that the other way of speeding up time is with money, by research and buying you that time. Because ultimately what I see is what buys you time is these new findings. But the quicker we get them, new findings, the new drugs, then we've got these options for when that time comes when you need it. And I think that's, it does resonate with everybody who has a cancer that comes back or can come back, is that need to fight time. And we are constantly battling that. And the faster we do the research, the quicker we can bring new things through. And what is research dependent on? It's dependent on smart people, committed researchers, but also for them to be funded. So, Jeff, you have, that you're fundraising now. So tell us about what you're doing, and then I'll ask you a few more questions around that.
Back in 2016, a group of mates and I, they wanted to support me, and they said, they got around me, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to do two things. I wanted to create a space where I could bring families together around a fun day. I wanted to put smiles on people's faces, and especially smiles on people's faces that were challenged with myeloma. I knew all too well the pain of dealing with a myeloma diagnosis and how that reverberates through your family. And so what I and a group of friends created was the Mind Analyzer Run and Fun Festival. It's now in its 6th year, and we've raised over $300,000 for myeloma research and patient support, which it's just humbling.
So tell us a bit more about it. What's it called again, and what do you do?
So it's the My Analyzer Run and Fun Festival. What we have is we have it's an event that we have typically in March, mid-March, where we bring families together to walk with their dogs, to run 4, 8 or 12 kilometers. And we also host a heap of entertainment, all dedicated to bringing families together who have been impacted by myeloma to celebrate the fact, and to I guess to reflect on how hard it is to deal with myeloma. You know, we've got this year in 2022, we had at least 10 families there, and each of those families had anywhere from 10 people present all the way through to 150 people present. We had 800 odd people present on the day, and it's just so humbling to be able to look out across a sea of people, and everybody brings their own identifier. You know, there's the Bakers, Melissa Baker, she's a good friend. She passed from lymphoma. All of her family come down and they wear pink caps. Team Westy, Mick West, Westworth rather, he's recently been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and he had 130 odd friends and family there, all wanting to be there to support Mick. But in turn, they're supporting our event, which supports and funds trials with Snowdome Foundation.
So have you managed to get any fat hematologists to run in there?
Well, and this is one thing that I was particularly impressed by. We had Epworth had a team there this year as well, not to mention your good self running the 8 kilometers last year, Miles. So
that's what I was meaning. But we also, yes, but there hasn't been a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, I've just really wanted to thank you as well. Snowdome, you know, have thoroughly enjoyed the connection that you've and what you've brought to that. I mean, it's not just raising the money, but the community, as you said. It's about the bringing it all together. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you mentioned to me the other day that people want to give for something specific, or what do you think people want to give for? And what do they get out of giving?
What I find, people give when they, well, there's a huge emotive aspect to it. When you have somebody close to you that is impacted by cancer or impacted by adversity even, you want to help. And helping is really, really hard in a lot of instances, simply because you don't know how to help. And so by being present first and foremost, but also in being present, also giving with your presence, with your energy, and indeed with money, you know, that's helping. I've had friends in you know, sitting around having a joke about the fun run. I've had friends laugh simply at the fact that you know, it wouldn't it be just an amazing dream that, you know, one day we find a cure not only for, you know, thousands of people with myeloma, but, you know, in some way, shape or form, our silly little fun run that has such a big impact, it contributes to curing myeloma, or makes life easier for people with myeloma. Means that, you know, I spoke about the utter devastation that I felt when I was diagnosed. Having a scenario where our fun run contributes to the fact that people don't have to feel that utter devastation when they're diagnosed. You know, once upon a time, people died from diseases like HIV, and now, you know, people live very comfortably with HIV. And wouldn't it be nice for myeloma to be a chronic disease as opposed to a terminal disease? And knowing the fact that in some way, shape or form, we contributed to that outcome.
Well, I think, speaking with my doctor's hat on, I think, when I was training, and then before 1999, the years leading up, there was basically one drug for myeloma, and that was melphalan, and the average survival, not remission, the remission was less than a year, but the average survival was 3 years. Mm-hmm. And that's moved a long way since, in less than 25 years. So you can imagine with that trajectory, what's going to happen into the future. And I think that's a reality of, that's a real, a real concept that things will change and be like HIV. Why not? So, you've just heard from Brenda about CAR Ts. So we know that CAR Ts for myeloma are currently being considered by the regulatory authorities in Australia to fund. The difference is, as you touched on before, myeloma is being considered as a terminal disease. None of us get off this world alive. And so, hopefully that terminal means 20, 25 years, but suddenly we've got the concept of CAR Ts, which have shown amazing results so far. So how do you feel where you are with this treatment that's being dangled in front of you?
I guess I'm excited. I'm excited for all of the people that can access it now via trials. I mentioned a good friend, Mick Westworth. He's recently been approved for a trial where he's going to get access to that treatment, and that's just exciting. So I'm also excited because at the moment I'm on a treatment regime of daratumumab, Revlimid, and those treatment options, 3 years ago when I started on those, they were the cutting edge of immunotherapy treatment, and it was exciting being on those. But I do know that, at some point in time, I will relapse and I'm going to need the next treatment. Where I am a little bit nervous is I'm hoping that the daratumumab and the Revlimid keep me stable until such time as I can access the CAR T cell trials at a point where, I can, whether that be via compassionate access, whether that be funded through the government. So I guess I'm a little bit nervous in some respects, hoping that my numbers remain stable. But gee, I'm optimistic at the fact that the fact that right now we've got really smart people that are modifying DNA within a cellular structure to help me live longer, and people like me. It blows my mind. It really does.
We have a lovely comment from Gayleen Collison, who's said she's been traveling with myeloma for 13 years. Jeff Neeson, you are amazing. I was diagnosed at 49, 2 stem cell transplants and many treatments, and now she's on a 6th treatment with pomalidomide. So I think
awesome.
It is awesome. So I'm going to introduce Al Evans, who I've known for a long time. Al has a different journey. Al, your mum had myeloma, and you're fundraising for myeloma. You're a young boy then. You're a very much a man now. So Al, please tell us about the story with you and Sally.
Yeah, so Mum was diagnosed at a very young age with multiple myeloma. She was 31, I think, at the time, and which is a very young age for multiple myeloma. We were in country Victoria. I'm here now in Echuca, and that's where we grew up. And I was only a young kid when Mum was diagnosed. I think I was 6 or 7 at the time. My brother was 4 and sister was 2, so we're just a very young family here in Echuca. And recall from a young age, Mum making regular trips down to Melbourne to see Miles. Back and forth to Melbourne, and she'd do that a lot and would come back. I just remember, not having any hair or things like that along the way. But she always just had a really positive outlook on it, and really saw those clinical trials as something that was a real positive for her, and was something that she jumped at and really got really excited about doing them.
Yeah, I know she told me, and your dad said the same thing, that in some ways having a diagnosis, which was there and it was going to ultimately take her, and she knew that, it had a very different way in which the family was brought up. I mean, do you have memories around that?
Yeah, no, I do. We were probably shielded a bit as kids. Mum was she probably dumbed it down a bit for us, and we knew she was going to Melbourne. We knew she wasn't well, but that's all we knew. That was just Mum. She was going down. She had a cancer, and we always thought, we were probably a bit naive as well, we always thought she was going to be okay, which unfortunately wasn't the case. But yeah, we knew that. I guess it was something we were really accustomed to as when we were growing up, as what Mum had.
You had the community around you, around her?
Yeah. You'll probably recall some of the things that her friends would do, and there'd be very funny. There'd be a calendar.
What do you mean, a calendar?
Oh, there would be a calendar that would be sent out to, that would be created for Mum. There'd be some quite humorous photos in the calendar of some special friends of hers in town. So that would bring a smile to people's faces. And
that was the like the fireman. Was it a monthly? It was a nudie calendar.
Yeah, yeah, there was something like that. There was, I think, Dad featured in something there. But it was good. You can see very fond memories of that, and she had some beautiful special friends that really assisted her, and we're really lucky as a family to have that community support.
You know that the clinical trials made her survive so long. I mean, that's what's driven what you're doing now. Is that? Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's only been in the probably as I've matured as a person, that I've really come to understand and appreciate all that she went through. Probably took it a little bit for what it was when we were younger, and just accepted that that this was Mum and this is what she was doing. But now looking back on reflection, she went through a lot, and we have a lot to thank for the clinical trials that you got her involved in, and then she went along for, which prolonged her life far longer than that she was ever expected, and that we ever expected as well. So the work I'm doing today is dedicated to that, and I think what's been echoed here is that bringing that hope and assisting others, and just trying to help people live longer.
Tell us what you're doing, Al.
A charity run, similar-ish to Jeff. Not at the magnitude yet of what he's doing, but hopefully getting there one day. But running from Melbourne to Echuca in June, in about 3 weeks' time. It's approximately 250 kilometres over 4 days. So it's a pretty long way. I haven't run that far, obviously, before, but because that's a bit crazy. But
how are you going to do it? That's amazing.
Yeah, I've been in training for a little bit now. So got a coach involved and been doing some serious training for it. But I think I get out there, I run. The reason I run and the reason I got involved again was when I was in America, and I just wanted to do something in honour of Mum, and running. I get a real kick out of that, and gets the endorphins going, and some really nice positive thoughts happen as well. So that's sort of the reason why.
And you're getting sponsors along the way, or sponsors to support this?
Yes, so we've been very lucky so far to have a number of sponsors get on board. Evan Shoes, you can see the little banner behind me, is one of our sponsors. And yeah, we've raised close to $50,000 so far pre the runs, which is unbelievable. And hopefully, yeah, we'll continue that and push towards the $75,000 mark, which would be amazing. We'll have an event here in Echuca after the run, and hopefully try and continue to raise funds and awareness for the Snowdome Foundation.
What is it that grabs you about Snowdome?
We've been involved as a family for a number of years. Ever since we were first involved, I think it was the Great Shake-Up. Daryl Summers was there, which was pretty cool. It's just the Snowdome Foundation has been incredibly welcoming to us as a family. We've attended a number of their key events, and it's held a really special place in our hearts. Miles, you've been instrumental to our family, and knowing that you're behind the Snowdome Foundation, that's something that I know we're all very proud of and grateful to be a part of.
And what would you, when people ask you, oh, look, your mum's had her journey and why are you doing it? I mean, obviously, there's that, what Jeff was talking about was, his wanting to change. When you're running there, what are you thinking about? I'm
in a fortunate position where I've got the ability to try and make a difference. And I think even though I hope I can do something in some small way and try and encourage people to get on board and do something as well. I think it's like all these little things, my little run that I'm doing, and there's all the other things that people are doing along the journey. I think, as Jeff mentioned, hopefully one day we can change multiple myeloma from a terminal illness to something that's chronic, and that's it's horrible to think that something is incurable, and it still is. It's great that there's a prolonged life expectancy now with myeloma patients, but it would be wonderful to try and bridge that gap and try and find the cure for it.
Al, you're a remarkable young man. It's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be a huge success, and we'll come back to that. So, Jeff, I'm going to ask you a question about, what advice you would give to Al. But before you answer that, I'm going to just ask the audience and just let you know that we're winding this up in a few minutes, and there's plenty of opportunities to ask some questions, and I'll cover some in a second. But please go to the chat. And you can see what some people have asked, and we'll try and address those. And if you want to ask any members of the panel, please go ahead. So, Jeff, I'm just going to ask you, what advice would you give Al? He's a pretty amazing young man. It's pretty hard to give him advice, but please share something.
Oh, look, Al, look, from me, I guess, thank you so much for supporting all of us in what you're doing. It's very kind of you to do. Look, I think with regards to advice, I think the most important thing is being clear about what you want to achieve, and set yourself a goal. You've set the goal of $75,000, and I found when I was with asking for things for myself, I'm terrible at doing it. But when it comes to raising money for cancer research and asking for a charity, I can ask very comfortably for anything. So I guess my advice is don't be afraid to ask. If you need any support, if you need money, if you need any resources, my suggestion to both Alistair and also to others that are thinking about, raising funds or raising support, just ask. Because there's so many people out there that have wonderful hearts that want to help, that don't know how to. And if you ask those people or publicize what it is that you need, there's so many people that'll come to your aid to support you to do the wonderful initiative that you're currently driving. And look, good luck with your run. That's huge.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jeff.
don't have a 250-kilometre option at the next
No.
at the next thing, Jeff. So there's some interesting questions that are coming up, and I'd like Brenda and Karen to join the discussion. But one of the questions that's come up has been about acute myeloid leukemia. And I think, this is often what comes up with CAR T cells when we start talking to audiences beyond blood cancers, which is, what about breast cancer? What about ovarian cancer when we talk about CAR T cells? So just to tell the audience, so CAR T cells ultimately are about taking, in Brenda's case, her own T cells that are functioning, genetically manipulating them with a protein that can then target the specific tumour that you're directing against. So in Brenda's case, it was a protein on the surface, which is either called CD19. In myeloma, it's against a protein called BCMA. And I think the holy grail for a lot of researchers in cancer immunology is to have that protein to be able to genetically engineer the cell to be able to present and have those docking stations that will bind onto the tumour. Acute leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia has been a tricky one, but we thought myeloma was tricky 4 years ago, and we seem to have got there. But it's because you basically don't want these genetic cells to bind onto normal tissue. So the problem with acute myeloid leukemia is that you can bind onto normal stem cells in the bone marrow, because that's where what acute myeloid leukemia is derived from, normal stem cells that make our blood, are neutrophils which fight infection. So the challenge there is to produce attacking cells that don't attack the body. And so there's a lot of work to be done. We'll eventually get there with AML. In fact, there is a number of clinical trials that are being developed. And in fact, the person who was Sam Fiorenza, who was at the last Blood, Sweat and Tears of Joy, is working on exactly that at Seattle, and there'll be AML studies that are coming up. So it certainly is a major target. So there's targets for all of the blood cancers, and all of them are going to be improved. So I'm going to go back in the last couple of minutes, go back to you, Karen, and just ask, what have you learned tonight? What have you walked away thinking?
A lot. My heart's definitely full. I feel like, you just hear everybody's story, and it's been touched on already that everyone's journey is different, but I think it's just nice to be able to hear how people are battling their own thing, but optimistic, and that hope is definitely there. And I think it's just nice to see how people are giving back. And I think for me, I'm doing it in my own way, and I think with time I want to continue to do more and be more active. And I don't know, I think it's just anything that anyone can do to help move this forward is a wonderful thing. And I think for a lot of people, I think Alistair mentioned it, people want to help, they maybe just don't know how. I think maybe it was Jeff. So I think to be able to have the conversation and make this topic front of mind and give people opportunities to help support, it's a great thing.
Everyone who's part of the Snowdome community, which has grown, I think part of that is to make awareness and to make people feel comfortable about the discussion about blood cancer. So because for us, we need to hear these stories so that we know what's important to people. And some of the things that have come out tonight, Brenda, who is happy to be the guinea pig, and is actually, and Al, who is, at such a young age thinking about how he can impact. I mean, the concept of cancer to a young person in their 20s is very, very foreign. But, this is, people often say, what can I get? I actually feel good that I've got it. Sounds crazy, but people often say, I feel privileged to have gone through. What we want to do is let them go through their journey. The body is a frail organism, and things go wrong, and it's not our faults. And that's one of the things in blood cancers. It's nobody's fault. It's not, they haven't smoked, they haven't eaten the wrong foods, they haven't done, it's just happened to them because it's a mutation. And in fact, Juliet Hollands asked a question about, genomic testing in myeloma and helping with treatment choices. One of the things that we haven't touched on is the finding the causes of these cancers. And one of the things that Snowdome has done has worked on trying to, what I would call, molecularly profile the tumours, so that we get a better answer and understand what the diseases are going to behave like. I often say, looking down the microscope is like taking a photo, but you don't know whether it is an aggressive tumour or a passive tumour. Is that photograph of that person passive, aggressive? Are they resistant? Are they resilient? Is it going to be hard to treat? And so the molecular testing is important. We're scratching the surface for myeloma. We've come a long way, particularly through the Wilson Centre for lymphoma, where we can genetically profile people, particularly when they relapse and pick treatment options. So getting to the root of the disease is really important to get the right treatment. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'm just going to thank everyone. I thank you, Karen, for being inspirational and brave. I think it really speaks to the importance of having support, but having your own energy. And I know everybody at the Bloody Good dinner a few years ago was just, wishing you the best of luck. And I think, their prayers have been answered. Brenda, you're amazing. You're not too old. You certainly don't look too old here. You've got a lot to contribute. And, I think every person into the future will thank you for, being on that, being prepared to go through what is a scary unknowns, because there's a lot of unknowns. And Al, good luck in getting to Echuca. I'm going to be there on that when you're there. I'll buy you the first beer, I promise.
Thanks,
But, Sally's journey, 19 years, and that was because of clinical trials. And that's all I can say, is that you brought that point home, that clinical trials saved you, allowed her to watch you kids grow up. And that's, why she was such a supporter, and she gained her energy from you guys. And she did these trials for everybody. As Jeff said, when he was told he had a terminal cancer, the first person he thought about was the other people in his family. And Jeff, you're a remarkable person for what you've done. We all are rooting for you to be able to get on those clinical trials. And I know everyone will be saying, why the hell, that just doesn't seem fair. And quite frankly, it isn't. And we are working to it. And we are working on those. The myeloma doctors community is working on it. So one of the things that's come up, and Kirsty will answer, is how can people link in to this? And if people go to the chat room, they'll be able to see Al's fundraising page. If you just want to make a comment on that as I hand over to Kirsty. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Snowdome. Thank you to the audience. Thanks for people who are participating. I just love these evenings because it makes me realise why I get up in the morning and stay up late. Kirsty, over to you. Kirsty, that's the CEO of Snowdome.
Well, thank you, Miles, as always. Thank you to all of the panel, Jeff, Karen, Alistair and Brenda. I think I have such a great honour in leading Snowdome, and when I hear your stories, it just brings to life. And I think one of the things that it does do is actually galvanise us all. As you know, Snowdome is singular in our focus to ensure that every Australian blood cancer patient has the best opportunity for a cure. And we can only do this if we join forces with our incredibly generous donors and supporters. And that's about funding best national and international research to accelerate these treatments and get them to patients faster. And it's about the access. And whilst this is marvellous to hear these stories of hope and resilience, I think I mentioned last September that the prevalence of blood cancers is up 41% in the last decade. And regrettably, we've still got so much more to accomplish. So we're very brave at Snowdome, and we're being very ambitious. We're aiming to raise 25 million by 2025, and we can't do that without you. We want to be able to invest that into blood cancer research. We want to accelerate immunotherapies access across Australia. And ultimately, we want to ensure that blood cancers become manageable conditions, so that when we hear these stories, it's something that you die with and not from. So I think that, you know, to Jeff's point, we have to be brave about asking. So with the end of the financial year fast approaching, I'd like you all to consider joining us on this mission and consider Snowdome Foundation in your planning. And together, I think that we can make hope real. So thank you in advance. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work and the dedicated team that put this together, and especially Eliane and Fiona, who've been working in a COVID situation all night long. Thank you very much. We will provide links to Alistair's page, and we look forward to telling you about Jeff's event next March. And we're also looking forward to announcing some really special projects that we've got coming up in childhood leukemia, in myeloma, and in lymphoma. So thank you very, very much for joining us. This brings the event to a close. So good night, everyone, and think of us at tax time. Bye.